All right, we're live. Yeah, welcome to the
podcast one,
the GrindKing Show.
1.2.
Yeah, 1.2 because we already tried this.
Yeah, we're excuse us for being a little amateurish, learning as we go, but that's how you got to start somewhere.
Oh yeah, and we were gonna say we like the name the GrindKing Show.
Yeah, the GrindKing Show is what we're gonna call it. I think at this point we're kind of what I find in business is that you kind of just go for stuff and then you correct as you go. So
this is for sure going for it.
We apologize for any
technical difficulties.
Exactly.
During this time period. So what's up, Donald?
Well, I'm kind of excited for this chapter of GrindKing. This would be like chapter 3, you might say, or 3.0, whatever, because I had a really good run at the beginning.
GrindKing 3.0.
Yeah, and or maybe the way I like to term this is the return of El GrindKing.
The return of El GrindKing.
There's a lot of history and how things went and how things failed, how things are going to go. So we're going to just jump into sort of, I guess, the beginning.
Yeah, let's start there. So why don't we talk about where GrindKing comes from, the beginning?
Okay.
Yeah, before 3.0, before what we're doing today and this new podcast. Let's dive into like the history of GrindKing,
okay.
How it started,
okay,
who you are.
Okay, well, I'm Donald Cassell.
Hey, Donald.
And I've started GrindKing in 1988, which was back then. That was sort of the 80s, where it was. I was starting. I got into skateboarding in the 70s, probably the mid to late 70s is when it sort of became this new thing for me. And what was really exciting at that time was that there was this. There was the main magazine that I read at the time was Thrasher, and the truck company that I used to really love I still love independent, even though my competitors.
You heard it here. We still love independence.
Because that was the truck I rode, and many diehard indie fans will know it's indie for life, unless you start your own truck company, and then you got to support your own.
Hence GrindKing.
But yeah, so the way it started for me was back in the late 70s, was that we started seeing in the magazines that there was these guys taking it to skateboarding, started getting into the vertical, and there were some skate parks. But the main thing that was interesting to me is that people would drain swimming pools or find empty swimming pools, and that was like finding a perfect way. If it was a good pool, it would be like going surfing and seeing the waves are just on fire, perfect waves.
Yeah. Except
you could ride them over and over.
It's almost like finding the perfect surf spot.
Yeah.
It'd be like what a wave pool is today.
Totally. It was like that. And it was kind of a new thing. And the thing that really got my attention and what made it cool for me was when I started seeing this thing called Dogtown. And, it was like, wow, these are not like sidewalk surfers. These guys are badasses. They're bad boys. I mean, they go around. They just had this attitude. That's a big thing about skateboarding, is it has attitude, more than like, golf or tennis. Skateboarding, it's an individual thing. There's an attitude. It's a culture behind it. There's a lot of, you have art, music, fashion. Skateboarding really is kind of like the core of extreme sports, and a lot of extreme sports like surfing and surfing influenced skateboarding at the beginning, but then it kind of turned around, and then skateboarding
turned its own thing.
Started influencing surfing, because the first moves on a skateboard, everyone's trying to act like they're surfing, but then when surfing started getting crazy and people were getting airs and going vertical and doing these maneuvers, that transposed into surfing later, because it
went from like Gidget. Wasn't that like old surf movie with the girl on the surfboard?
Yeah, it was like kind of like a little bit cheesy in a sense, but that was cool at the time. But when it became when skateboarding came into this new era of Dogtown and vert, it became a radical sport. It was rad, back then.
You clearly see its influence today, like
and
everywhere.
it influenced everything. It really, skateboarding became the core of these extreme sports. It bleeds over into, for sure, surfing, snowboarding, motocross,
even music genres.
Yeah,
skateboarding's influenced hip hop, punk rock,
fashion, and everything. So, skateboarding is a cultural phenomenon more than just a sport. And that's when I started getting into it. I started to see, and so I was looking in the magazine. And I used to always like worship the Dogtown guys because I thought they were the coolest, and probably my favorite, because style is an important. Style is a huge thing. I was a skateboarder and never got to be pro, and I don't think I had. I could skate, but I don't think my style, was something that, I admired people that had it because I didn't really have the style. But when I saw guys like Jay Adams, especially, that was just like, wow, I want to ride like that.
Yeah.
That to have that style. I mean, there's very few people that have that beautiful style. Like Hosoi would be another one. Hosoi and Jay were the style masters for me.
Would you say at that time that you kind of discovered that part of skateboarding, that it started to shape your identity a little bit when you were that age?
I wanted to be like them. We all did. We all wanted to be as cool as them, even though they were sort of like the gods of skateboarding at the time because they were doing stuff that
nobody
no one
else
had seen.
Yeah.
So, and here's just to show you kind of the era that I come from or started from. This was my skateboard that I rode back in this, probably late 70s, early 80s. And it had all the greatest things. It had actually this. So, it's so old now that this.
You had to put so many things on your skateboard back in the day.
Thing. I had the nose guard. I had the rail things. I had copers, and I had this thing I think it was called the bird because it kind of looks like the finger, but it goes over and it covers this kingpin because look how high the old indie kingpins on my board here. You can see the top of that kingpin's, I think, even a little bit higher than this hanger. So when I would do grinds, especially on coping and stuff in a pool, that was a dangerous thing because it would get stuck on that and you go flying. So that's why they invented this thing. They had copers and this, so you could see it was really smooth. But it was sort of...
This is like a Band-Aid,
Yeah, it was sort of like, it was... Back then it was cool, but I started thinking like, why... I always wanted to be an inventor since I was a little kid. And, I tried some other inventions, but they were too complicated. And so I started thinking, well, what can I make that's simple that I can relate to? And as an inventor, you're always looking for a problem to solve. And back then, as a skateboarder, I had this problem of hanging up on the kingpin. So I was thinking like, well, that's a dumb thing because originally skateboard trucks were taken from roller skates.
Yeah.
And roller skates had this, but they don't grind.
No.
So they don't really, their kingpin sticks out. And the very first skateboarders, when they were kind of sidewalk surfers, just took the roller skate trucks and put them on boards. And they were narrower and they had this basic setup.
Yeah, they jimmy rigged it just like our podcast.
When the skateboarders, became more popular and boards got wider, trucks got wider, these remained the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I was riding and going like, that's kind of a dumb thing because it gets hung up. What if I could come up with an idea that would make it so that it would grind better, like a kingpin? This is called a kingpin. What if I created a grinding kingpin that would specifically be for grinding? And so this grinding kingpin idea became, I shortened the name to GrindKing. So
Grinding Kingpin. There's the name, guys.
GrindKing. And I made a prototype. When you invent anything, you have to make what's called a prototype and test it to see if it works. So if the proof of concept works, then maybe you've got a good idea. So I made a prototype, tested it out, and I was like, wow, that's way better than this. It's a game changer if you want to grind and not get hung up on a kingpin. So I created this kingpin, and that was kind of the beginning. I was like, wow, maybe this invention, I could sell it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know. I didn't have any. I wasn't from the skateboard industry. I was just some skater, and I didn't really have the business experience. So I just made this prototype, and then.
How long did it take from like making that prototype to actually realizing that maybe you had something and you could start a business in skateboarding?
Well, once I had it, it was sort of there was this opportunity for me because my brother, who is a crazy guy, he had this knack for meeting people and hanging around cool people.
The gift of Gab.
Yeah, he had the gift of gab. You know, I was more had the gift of tinkering around, making stuff. And my brother had this gift of gab, so he would always be talking. I'd see him talking to like some pro skater, some pro surfer, some actor, some rock star. He knew all these people that were like, how do you know? How did you get to meet that? I don't know, but he had that knack. And he ended up, you know, back in the probably the coolest story I have of the early days was my brother used to be, you know, he's like the crazy version of me. And he basically did some crazy stuff. And one of the things that, because pools were kind of the in thing at that point, we would go around and hunt for swimming pools that were empty.
Yeah.
And so we would drive around neighborhoods like Beverly Hills, and we would, you know, go and jump over walls or fences in yards of people's homes that we thought maybe weren't living there or were, you know, they were for homes for sale.
There was a drought at that time too, right?
Drought.
Yeah.
So we would go looking, and every once in a while we'd find an empty pool. And but most of the time pools were filled, and we'd see like these, oh, look at that pool, but there's water in it. So my brother mysteriously acquired these 2 pool pumps.
Mysteriously.
Yeah. And just, like, all of a sudden he had 2 pool pumps. And a pool pump is what pool maintenance guys use to drain a pool. And it basically is about a 2-inch diameter pipe that comes out of this pump.
Yeah, sucks the water out of there.
It basically sucks it out. I mean, gallons per minute. It's just draining your pool really fast.
And you guys had 2.
And my had 2. So you can imagine, I mean, a pool would be drained.
Yeah.
Where we could just wait a few hours and it would be a completely drained
You
pool.
could drain it, skate it in the same day.
Yeah.
Get out of there, come back, it's dry.
Totally. And so one day, there was this famous pool that was in the magazines, and I think it was in Thrasher, called the NP pool because it had a natural progression sticker. It's a surf company. It had this sticker on the coping, so that pool became known in the magazines called the NP pool.
NP pool.
And I remember we skated it. The best memory I have of that pool is we were skating it, and all of a sudden these guys come into while we're skating, these strangers coming into the backyard. And then we're looking at them, checking them out, and one of them I recognize it's Jay Adams. Oh my God, it's like this is my idol from that period. He was like the dude that I thought was the of all skaters, my favorite. And here he's walking into the backyard to skate the NP pool while we're there. And so we, of course, were just like, okay, we're stopped. Well, I didn't want to skate. We just wanted to watch him skate.
I can picture this moment in my head right now.
Yeah, it was like, you know, he's this god of skateboarding has just walked in. So we're like, bow down. Like,
it's the epitome of style and attitude.
Like, it's all there. You. And so he skates it, and it's just like, I mean, just incredible. Because he's like, this is the dude that is doing surf maneuvers and just skating it like he's just surfing it like it's nothing.
He's hitting probably the sickest frontside grinds.
Killing it, right? And we're just watching and just like jaw-dropping, you know, experience. And then I remember he just like skates it for not even that long. He had a good session, and then he's all like, "Well, fuck this place, let's go surf." It was just kind of like in and out. Yeah. And then we're just like, I mean, I still remember it today.
Just in awe.
It was just one of those moments that happened. And so we would go back to that pool, and one day we went back and it was filled.
Uh-huh.
And we were thinking, and we're back in the backyard. It's like, wow. And we had the pool pumps. So we start to drain the pool because we thought nobody was living there. And we got it with 2 pool pumps in, I think, probably an hour and a half or 2. The thing was like halfway empty. Uh-huh. This huge pool, halfway empty. And then all of a sudden this woman comes out of the house, and she's freaking out like, "Oh my God, what are you guys doing?"
Some random kids in the backyard.
Apparently, someone moved in.
Yeah.
We just thought, we could get away with it, but we only got halfway through, and then she's freaking out. We're like unplugging the pool pumps and trying to get the hell out of there.
This is the true Lords of Dogtown scene right there. Not like in the movies.
Yeah, another time I remember we were skating this pool in Beverly Hills, and we were in the back session, and all of a sudden someone's like, "Cops are here!"
Yeah,
and so we're like, "Oh fuck!" So everyone's running away, and I'm running down the side of the house trying to get out into the street. And as I'm running, because I'm freaking out, I'm not paying attention. There's a little flange of metal sticking out of the side of the house that I didn't notice. I didn't see it, and I ran right into it.
It's
and
clipped
it. Gashed me like gnarly.
Oof.
So I'm just like profusely bleeding from my head. And as soon as I go to the front yard, the cops are there, and they're all like, "You were skating that pool, huh?"
Yeah, because you're all bloodied up. Thought it was the pool.
And I was just like, "Oh no, whatever."
It's actually your guys' fault because I was running and I hit the metal shard.
So they kind of busted me, and of course they helped. They helped get in. I think I forgot what they did. That they got some bandages or something. But But it was kind of like the Wild West of skateboarding back then, because there weren't all these parks, so we would have to just find these pools and do our thing. So that kind of got me into this whole idea of through that, all those experiences. That's how my big problem was the kingpin hang. And that's how GrindKing came about. And then my brother had this company at that time. He started this new thing called Bronze Age. No, this was a little bit later, actually.
Okay.
Bronze Age was now we're going from the late 70s, early 80s, and I was doing architecture and all that stuff. I wanted to be a land developer, so I got my contractor's license. I wasn't planning on being in the skate industry, and I was never a good enough skater to be a pro. So I just kind of doing my stuff outside of that. And my brother, meanwhile, he was I'll just be honest, he was selling weed and other things and started making some money. And he was in the Venice area at that time, and of course, being a connector, being a guy that meets all these crazy people, he ends up making friends with Jay and all these pro surfers and all these amazing people. And he started this thing called Bronze Age, which was sort of like Dogtown was kind of like late 70s and early 80s had its biggest kind of like, it had a resurgence, but back then that's when it was on fire. It was like the new thing. And then sort of after Dogtown, in that area of Venice, the next big thing that was everyone wanted to ride for, including Jay and some pros, all those Venice guys that were the surf skaters, they were all riding for my brother's company called Bronze Age. And it was really a cool brand that it was a clothing brand. And my brother used to go to this trade show called ASR. And ASR was where it was called the Action Sports Retailer Show. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But back then,
I saw a picture of it on the internet.
That was the show that all the skaters. It was really cool back then. You had all the surf industry, the skate industry, the bikini industry, all the, so you go to this show and there would be all these pro skaters walking around and pro surfers and bikini girls. It was a great show. And my brother used to exhibit there for Bronze Age. That's where he started getting some traction, and it started to blow up. And you already had the grinding kingpin. Well, no, what I had just invented that. In other words, I had made a prototype, and I had proof of concept. It worked.
Okay.
At that point, it was an idea.
Yeah.
But I had a actual one that worked. And
you brought it with you.
And I told my brother, hey, you got Bronze Age. Let me go to the show and show this around. I didn't have a booth or anything, but he was like, yeah, for sure. So I went down there, and at this, also my brother, I should say, at that point, he had all his money, so he funded the start of GrindKing. So we were 50-50 partners at this point.
Yeah. And you tagged along. You had your prototype in your pocket.
He tells, come on down. So I go down the show, and I'm walking around the aisles because I didn't have a booth. So I'm walking around the aisles and I run into this distributor I saw on his name tag. This guy, Vic, VK from VK Sports. At the time, he's one of the distributors. I didn't know that, but I saw this guy and he's a distributor. So I said, hey, check this out. And this is just walking down the aisles. And he takes a look at the bolt and he goes, well, that's really cool. That's a cool idea. I'll take 1,000. And I was just like, what? Wait, 1,000? I didn't act. I tried to keep my.
They're like, oh yeah, cool, man.
No big deal, but it was for
Easy.
me. It was a huge deal. I was like, oh my god, like I didn't expect a huge order like that right off the bat. So
that was like a storyboard moment right there.
Yeah, so that was like kind of where the light bulb went off. Like, wow, I think this is like maybe
can actually be something.
I could turn this into a business.
Yeah,
and sure enough, after that show, I started getting more orders and reorders, and it started growing like crazy. And that's really how it started. It was really from that show, and that I remember, never forget that when he said, I'll take 1,000, that was just like, wow, I think this is something I could be doing.
For sure.
So I actually got out of the construction business, land development, all that stuff, to really start to focus on this new, because I always wanted to be an inventor, and all of a sudden I've got this invention and I got orders.
Yeah.
So I remember like packaging these things one by one and putting them on the floor, 10 across, 10 down, that would be 100, and another 100, just everything by, just by myself.
Isn't that incredible though? You had this like, you had skateboarding, right? That was kind of becoming part of your identity, and you always wanted to be an inventor, and then the two met together at the perfect
something
time.
I would suggest to people out there is that, if you have a passion in life, if you have any passions, I call it like the Crossroads. If you have a passion, let's say you really love music, and you like today, let's say you like technology.
Yeah.
So if you can cross section those two, music and technology, you can create a business or support yourself, and that's I think that's something that they don't
becomes
teach
play
in school, but these are the more things that can crisscross over each other. You have like this one passion and another passion or a strength. The more you can overlap them, the better chance of your success. And also not just in money making, but also in your happiness. Because if you're doing something you already like, it's not even your work. It's like you want to do that.
Yeah.
And then if you really get good at it, then the money will follow. If you become really good, a master of anything, people are looking for people that are really good at whatever that is.
For sure.
So that's what I think is important.
It's amazing though. Today you can do that so much easier than you ever.
Yeah.
I mean, today it's like you.
Today compared to back then. I mean, I had to start my business, GrindKing. I had to go to trade shows twice a year, to that ASR show. I had to advertise in magazines like Thrasher, which, in my opinion, it's a love-hate with indie and Thrasher, because I love them and they're part of the skate culture, and I have huge respect for what they are and what they've done. But there's a little bit of a love-hate there, because they also, they had, and I'll talk about some of that later on.
For sure.
With the products, but Thrasher is kind of, I hate to say, more of a catalog for their own stuff. I mean, you can advertise in there, but they're not going to give you the best placement.
Yeah,
you're never going to get the cover. You're never going to get the back cover, because that's indie.
Yeah,
that's just the way
it's a billboard for their businesses. They got a monopoly on it.
Indie, Venture, Thunder, Spitfire, Real, those brands and others are owned by that. They're part owner. I mean, the Fausto, who is the original creator of Indie and Thrasher. I mean, they of course, if you own the magazine and you own a product, you're going to make sure you get the best placements, the best reviews. So it would be like if Car and Driver owned Ford.
Yeah.
Who's going to get Car of the Year? Probably.
Yeah. Every truck page is an F-150. Yeah. Every sedan page
is just an advantage they have. That's part of the industry, but it always irked me, because it made me realize I'm going to always have to be number 2 or 3 at best if I ever can get that far.
Hey, number two is sometimes better than number 1 in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I mean, it can be, but
You don't get all the stress of being number one, but you're number two at the top.
But it's still it's not an even playing field.
Yeah, no, not at all.
The cool thing about today is that the trade show's gone and the magazine's kind of gone because Thrasher still exists, but you don't advertise in magazines anymore.
They're more like nostalgic culture now. They've kind of become they've kind of surpassed that, where it's like people aren't picking up a Thrasher magazine and really reading. People probably collect them.
Yeah, I mean,
at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Print stuff is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So that means there's a new game, a new playing field that isn't so dominated by any one company. They still dominate, but there's opportunities there for new ways to innovate rather than just products. You can find new ways to market, find new ways to create a way to sell your product that has never been better than today.
Yeah. So speaking of like innovation, I mean, you've innovated so many different things about skate hardware. Where do you see skateboarding today and like the innovations that are kind of out and about now? Have we innovated, or are we kind of at like a standstill right now with things that are innovating? Because we got a lot of skate hardware companies that have been around for a long time. You got some new players like Slappies and other things, but like where do you see it today?
Unfortunately for today, for a lot of brands, I'm kind of lucky because this is sort of, the third phase of GrindKing, because I've had my ups and downs. I started GrindKing '88 and went all the way to 2010 before I had to shut it down. And there's a story, that why that happened. But the long and short of it is that you have what's kind of good and bad about today is that you don't have like this community like it was back in the days when I first started, because the trade show you got to meet all your distributors from all over the world. You got to meet all these they were all there. Everyone was there. It was like a club.
Yeah.
You just were there and everybody's
face to face.
Everyone would say hi to everybody. And you got this feeling of community that, it was like the family. All the skaters would see each other there.
Yeah.
And you get to meet shops and things like that. So that's gone. So that's a negative thing about today. But the positive thing is that the amount of money, time, effort isn't necessary. You can reach more people directly rather than just shops. You can reach individual skaters better than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And you can create a community directly with those. Like instead of just the family as just the skate industry, the new way I see it is the family can be any skater in the world.
Yeah.
They can be part of your, you can bring them into what you're doing, your brand. And that's kind of where I see GrindKing going.
Yeah, skateboarding is more than just the pros and the magazines.
Yeah.
There's so many people in skateboarding that have individual identities, and they're into so many different things. Like we were talking about earlier, how skate culture has influenced that. But it's like skateboarding, in a way, I know for me, has become such a big part of my identity, even though I might not have enough time to hop on a skateboard as much as I'd like anymore. But for a lot of people, skateboarding means so much. And it's more than just the pro skaters. It's more than just the companies. It's this kind of big, giant family that's now worldwide through technology. You can see it everywhere.
Yeah, and to your point about innovation, because that's sort of like my position in skateboarding. Like I said, I was never a pro skater, and I was not the most stylish skater either, probably. So I just had to, because I loved skateboarding and I loved making stuff. I've always liked to tinker. So those two cross each other.
Yeah.
And for me, that was my opportunity to get into and contribute to skateboarding in that way. Is rather than be the best skater, I always wanted to make the best, whether it was a kingpin and then it eventually became these other inventions. I had now this sort of inroads to creating innovations. And so that's kind of what I wanted my position to be in and contribution to skateboarding, was to create innovations that were unique and progress the sport.
You've given a gift to skateboarding so that the athlete can take their athleticism, or the skater can reach that next point. And that's what you've given to skateboarding.
And that's satisfying to me. That would be like, if a skater pulled off a really tough maneuver trick. For me, if I can come up with an innovation that's successful, that gives me my high. That's like, for me, it's like, wow, I was successful.
Like he might have landed that trick because of that innovation that you did.
Something it contributed some way. Now, I also, being an inventor, I realized that not all my ideas were great.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, maybe less than half were great.
For sure.
But some of them were just, that's the price you pay. It's just like trying to do a trick. You don't land it every time. You fail sometimes.
You got to keep throwing stuff at the wall until certain things. Kind of like this podcast we put together. You got to do it over and over again.
Do it. You can't just sit there and think about it and talk about it. I think in life, what makes it so interesting is that you just go and take your idea and try it, do it. Don't waste time trying to be perfecting it and all that stuff. Sometimes I feel like I over try it and be too perfect sometimes, but I think what I've learned is that you're always going to change it anyway. So just get it out there and course correct as you go.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of make my products. I try and get them out there once I have an idea as fast as I can, and I know I'm going to keep improving it.
Yeah.
That's a given. And I think today, for the future of GrindKing, because this is sort of like the third phase of it. So I think the future of GrindKing, this is what I would term like phase 3, or I like to call it the return of El GrindKing.
Return of El GrindKing.
And that's because I'm going back to my roots. So is the reason why, GrindKing had a run from 88 to 2010. And I was doing really, really well, but then I made some bad decisions, and the timing was bad, so I ended up getting really in debt. And then I had to, there's a long story about how that happened. We can go into it in another episode, but long story short is that I went from being a really successful business and profitable to getting into so much debt that I had to take all the equity out of my house and put it in my business, which was a mistake because I shouldn't have touched my personal stuff. Because it didn't matter. And 6 months later, I had a really nice house, ocean view in the Palisades, and I took $1.2 million out of that house, all my equity, and I put it into my business. And because it was losing money at this point it was sort of that in the economy, there was a 2008, 2009, there was the economy was crashing, and I was giving it the gas. So I was doing the wrong thing. I should have been putting on the brakes, and I was putting a lot of money into Grind Queen, which is this girls line of clothing, which we'll talk about that another time. But long story short is that I went from being really profitable and successful to going into debt and then putting all my money from my house in my business, and then 6 months later it was all gone. And then I realized I had nothing left. And so I had to shut everything down. I had to lay everybody off, 23 people off. I had to shut my warehouse down. My house went into foreclosure. And I actually, I went from having all this stuff to having nothing. And so then I had to shut everything down, and I started doing underground parties just to survive. And I was doing those in warehouses as well, but they were just like these crazy all night long parties. They were a lot of fun, but they were illegal, and it was just a matter of time before I was going to get shut down, which eventually, amazingly, didn't happen for about 10 years. And that point, I when I finally got shut down, I was thinking I was just checking online about GrindKing, and I saw this video from this guy Rad Rat. And the video was called "What Happened to GrindKing."
Shout out to Rad Rat.
Yeah, Rad Rat. I have to say that he inspired me, because when I saw that video, I was like, "What happened to GrindKing? What's this shit?" So I go in there and I watch this video, and it's a whole story about me. As I don't know, he did a lot of research because he kind of had this whole story of where I began, all the innovations, and then I do the parties and and he didn't know what happened to me, and I was just like, holy shit, there's this whole story about grinding. And like, to me, I wanted to forget about grinding because it was a bummer for me. It was like
Did you
it
not
was.
know at that time that how passionate people were about?
No, I just thought it would be like lost in history, and I was kind of bummed out on the losing it, so I didn't even want to think about it. Like the parties were good because it kept my mind off of being depressed that I lost everything. So I just I saw that video. I was like, what? There's a whole video on GrindKing, and I watched it, and I was like, holy shit, people maybe care about. So I think, oh, maybe I'll restart it. So I contact this guy who was in. Everyone was making their stuff in China at that point.
Yeah.
Which was different from the past because I used to make everything in the USA. But so I met, I forgot how this guy in China, this guy had a factory that makes trucks, and he had heard of me. And when I think I approached him or someone introduced me to this guy. Yeah, someone introduced me to this guy. And he goes, oh yeah, I know GrindKing, we should do your trucks. And I said, well, I don't really have any money to make trucks. And he goes, well, I'll make the molds and everything. We'll get you started again. And you know, and you have we'll make your trucks. And I was just like, holy shit. Like that's just an opportunity for me. I can get back into the game. So but I had not been in the game for about 10 years. So it was sort of like things had changed a lot. There was no more trade show. Everything had changed in 10 years. It was a whole new ball game. And so I said, well, I'll let's see what happens. So I did a Kickstarter, and I launched it through Kickstarter. I didn't know anything about Kickstarter, and I wasn't really that techie at that point. But what happened was I just went for it. And so I launched a Kickstarter, and it was really a horrible campaign. I barely cleared the minimum to really get the money from Kickstarter, because you have to hit a certain minimum, your minimum amount that you ask for. If you don't hit it, you get nothing. And I had made it really low, so I hit it, but it was a low number. I think I hit like $6,000. But it got me kind of back. I started selling some trucks, and I made the mistake, I think, of launching the Disruptor, which was, it's a really good truck. It was a refined truck from all the years of making trucks, but it was sort of where I left off in 2009 when I shut everything down. 2009, 2010, it was sort of like that truck was where I left off, and it was a good truck, and I made a couple improvements, but mainly I think the reason was not that it wasn't a good truck or anything. It was just that I didn't know how to market it. I did Kickstarter, but I didn't have all my social media, and there was no YouTube. So it's just, I sort of just winged it. Yeah. And you can't just wing it. No. That's the thing about this new phase, kind of 3.0, or I like to call it the return of El GrindKing, because I'm going back to my roots in terms of how I'm going to approach it this time. And that is really there's two different things about this phase that I'm going to make sure I do it right this time, that I learned is, number one is that you have to really tie everything together in a marketing plan and strategy where you're incorporating YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, your website, landing pages. There's all this new technology that I had to learn, which was, I'm an older guy now, so a lot of guys from my generation, they're not familiar with all this new technology. Yeah. And for me, with no budget, it was either you learn that or you're gonna fail. Yeah. And when I launched the 2.0 GrindKing, you could say in 2018, I didn't know all that. And I just kind of went in seeing what happened, and I paid the price because it was sort of a lackluster launch. Yeah. And that's the one big mistake I made back then, is I didn't know what I need to know, what I know now.
Things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I'll pat myself on the back for, because this is something that in looking back and how I'm going to take this forward is that I immersed myself in technology. I started reading, listening to books, practicing, trying to stay ahead of everything I could in the latest technology. And I just it was sort of, to me, it was sort of like either I learn this or die.
Yeah.
I'm just going to die, poor, because the parties weren't going.
Guys, this podcast is completely generated by artificial intelligence.
Yeah. This is all AI.
This is all AI.
So that was, for me, a big, I think that's what's changed. And for this phase of GrindKing is that I'm now embracing every technology I can come across, and I've gotten pretty good at some of it.
Yeah.
And I'm incorporating into my stuff. The other part of it is that I'm going to go back to my roots of being an innovator. So my plan isn't just to come back and just do a truck here and there. I want to come back and bring products into the market that will elevate skateboarding itself. I mean, one of the problems I see in skateboarding today is that the innovations are here in between. They're sort of like back in the days when I was doing the trade shows, you would go to the trade show and you'd walk around and you'd see all this new stuff, new companies, new innovations. And me, especially, my customers would always come to my booth and always go, Donald, what's new? Yeah. So I always had to show something new that I had created. And that was a challenge for me, but I got pretty good at it. And people came to expect that. After stopping for, so long, I kind of lost the passion and the drive to be that way. So I kind of just, when I did the 2.0 for the Disruptor, I kind of just took what I had in the past and just put it back out there. And I think that was a mistake. So 3.0, or Return of El GrindKing, I'm going to go back to really creating stuff that is next level. Yeah. And my goal is to elevate skateboarding to where skaters will be able to reach a higher level of skateboarding through some of these innovations.
Yeah, I haven't thought of that. I mean, it's crazy because it's like skateboarding's not that old. And if you really look at it, it's like in the years that it's been around, it's not an old thing.
No.
So there's a lot of room to innovate.
Yeah, and
it's different than like some sports that have been around for such a long time.
Yeah.
They innovate a little bit over time, like football or some of the safety of the players and things like that. But skateboarding has a lot of room. It's like everything's a clone.
I mean, like you look at a lot of the trucks coming out now, new companies, they're going backwards, it seems. They're reissuing things. They're taking one of the things that you would have bothered me many years ago, but is sort of, I'm actually flattered by this, is that a lot of people are adopting this inverted kingpin.
Yeah, everything's inverted.
Yeah, and that, back when I first invented it, I had a patent on it, but people were still knocking me off, and they would knock me off like they didn't get, like, I remember I went to a trade show one time, and this guy from Deadbolt, he's now my friend, but I really didn't like him back then because he had this company called Zorlak, and he came out with this total knockoff GrindKing kingpin called the Deadbolt, I think he called it, or something like that. Yeah, and I went up to him at the show. I was like, dude, like you copied my shit. I got a patent on it. And I'll never get his answer. He goes, he looks at me, he goes, well, sue me. And I was just like, huh? Sue you? I was like, what kind of answer is that? And I was thinking, like, scratch my head, like, he just said to sue him. And I talked to my lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, we can do that. You have a patent, but it's going to cost like a lot of money.
The attorneys always win.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, well, how much money? It's like thousands and thousands of dollars, And I had paid like $8,000 for my patent. I was thinking, like, thousands, like, and what happens if I don't? What if you got no money, or what if he goes, well, I mean, that's the way it goes,
So you pay for the attorney.
I mean, if you sue somebody and they don't have any money, even if you win, too bad. Yeah. So I was just like, I made the choice, and I also learned a lesson, like, sometimes having a patent doesn't necessarily pay off. I think it's
little things about it.
Yeah, and they can get around it, but also they could just tell you to go pound sand, go sue them, and then what are you going to do? Spend all this money, and you sue the guy, and you win, and you get nothing,
You spend all that time.
He says he's broke, whatever. So I learned a lesson, but now I was going to kind of go back to the point of, back then I was always everything I had created back then, every innovation that was good was copied by other brands. So I kind of got used to that, and it always really, bugged me. But now I look at it and I see these people, these even indie and the big brands are copying the inverted kingpin, and I kind of smile every time I see that, because it's like, wow, it took them 30 years, but I mean, like, hey, that's cool that it validates the idea. And I remember Jay Adams when I got, because Jay was my first team rider, and he told me when I first gave him those kingpins, and he was riding, he goes, I think one day everybody's gonna have these. Every truck's gonna have them. And I was just like, really? He goes, yeah. He really believed in them. So that was a big deal for me, that my idol skater, this guy who I worshipped, became my first team rider and validated and actually liked the product.
He was kind of right?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. I mean, I rest in peace. He's still my, all-time favorite skater, and he was definitely a legend of a guy, for skateboarding. And so anyway, that idea for me is like, I still don't want people to necessarily copy my innovations, but you just have to go for it and not worry too much people copy, because they're going to probably copy you. That being said, going forward, this next phase, I'm going to be creating a lot of innovations. As a matter of fact, there's some stuff in the works I'm really excited about. It's top secret right now.
Can't really talk.
Yeah, so I gotta keep it secret.
Yeah,
and I am patenting. I am gonna get some patents on this stuff, because I do want to protect it. Yeah, and I am gonna sue you this time.
We will sue you.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of this next phase. It's really about getting into playing a new game, using technology and using things that you can market. A lot of the innovations for me now are in the marketing strategy, and how we connect with the skaters that are. I want to build a community around the brand rather than just push product to skaters. I want them to feel part of GrindKing, I call it Team GrindKing. So Team GrindKing in the past, I used to sponsor skaters and pay them, and I found that to be not the greatest thing, because skaters, they can sometimes jump to other companies, they can make all these crazy demands, and it's just distracting from creating really great product, because they're not creating. I'm still creating the product, but to me, it's like, you look at like, let's say Elon Musk and with Tesla, and how he was so innovative, not just with the product itself, but how he sold Tesla. He didn't have car dealerships. He doesn't even advertise. Yeah, and he became, one of the most successful car companies ever, with a completely new way to market and sell his product.
Yeah.
And so I looked at that, and I said, why can't I do something similar for skateboarder? And rather than, focus on just trying to appease pros and be cool with them and hope that works out, I would rather just create really good, put my time and energy into innovate products which I believe are going to benefit the pros and just the average skater. My more focus is going to be with this new phase and Team GrindKing. Team GrindKing is going to be anyone who wants to sign up is on Team GrindKing.
Yes, and speaking of that, there was a comment on our Instagram post the other day, and it was for guys like, hey, do you guys sponsor 30-year-old skaters whose dream it was always to be on Team GrindKing?
Anyone could be on Team GrindKing.
That guy,
anybody. How is that going to work? How will they benefit? Well, if you're on Team Grind, the thing that's really exciting to me is that by creating these products, I don't want to just be the only one thinking about them. Yeah. And giving my view of what they should be. I want the skaters to tell me what to create and how to improve what I have, or give me ideas, and then I'm going to take those and create products that fit what they crave, rather than me telling them what they should have. I would rather them help feel like they're part of the brand.
They're the guys riding the boards.
They're
buying the products. They want to see. So just to tell everybody who's been commenting on our post, we appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean that.
We want to hear from you.
Yeah, I want the skaters out there to feel like they can be part of this brand.
Yeah.
And we're going to do things like have some, surveys and things so that so we get that feedback from them. So that's going to be part of our new chapter. And this podcast is also part of it, because we want people to understand, there's a lot of twists and turns in the story of GrindKing. We're only going to touch on a little bit today, but there's a lot more to the story that I think is interesting, because not only is it how GrindKing came to be and where it's going, but I think it can also help a lot of skaters out there aspire to do something themselves, whether it's even in skateboarding or other things. There's a lot of things I learned about business and creating things that I want to share besides just talking about skateboarding. I think it can help. It doesn't matter what industry you're in or what field you decide to go into. A lot of the lessons I've learned, because I made a lot of mistakes. That's why I lost everything. And those mistakes were valuable for me to look back at, because I learned, like, if you make a mistake and you don't learn from it, that's a tragedy. But if you learn from your mistakes, those mistakes are gold. Like, I won't make those same mistakes again. And I think, and I do believe that this phase of GrindKing, the return of El GrindKing, is going to be the most successful phase, because
based off of your mistakes,
all my mistakes, and what I've learned, and adding this new chapter of like technology and things like that. I think I'm in a position where I can be more successful than ever, and that's going to be also by collaborating with skaters out there that see an opportunity in this as well, because they can be part of it.
We really want to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
For those listening.
Yep.
I think that's a good place to end for today. Mm-hmm. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's plenty more to talk about. This was kind of just get our feet wet with this intro, but I think we'll plan on doing this every week.
Yeah.
And we'll be putting out a lot of content on social media, so we love to hear.
Follow us on
let
Instagram.
Us know.
We're starting this YouTube channel, so you'll be getting that link soon. You should have it already if you're listening. Listen, if you want to hear about the top secret things that we were talking about, not yet, but if you also want to get some...
If you want to be the first to know...
If you want to be the first to know, you got to join Team GrindKing.
Yeah, you got to join Team GrindKing.
There is a link in the bio to the website and to the landing page.
Yeah,
the landing page, that will connect you to our newsletter. Sign up, and you'll be getting some stuff.
There'll be a lot of benefits to joining Team GrindKing besides just your feedback. You also automatically are entered into we're going to be giving away some prizes. You're going to get exclusive discounts. There's a lot of benefits to being on Team GrindKing. So,
keep an eye out. Yeah.
Jump on board.
All of our socials, we're here and we're listening. So, thanks, Donald.
Yep.
All right, man.
Cool. Thank you.
See you guys next time. Peace out.